Alright, before we start, let's quickly define what a dictatorship is. According to Britannica, a dictatorship is a form of government in which one person or a small group possesses absolute power without effective constitutional limitations. I don't know what that means either, but it's basically a government that's ran exclusively by a small group or a single dude with a goofy haircut. I don't know if that's required, but it does seem to be the norm. Alright, now that I have that out of the way, let's get into this. Military dictatorship. Military dictatorships are a type of government where a country's military has total control over the nation, usually after seizing power by overthrowing the previous government in a coup d'etat. The leader of a military dictatorship more often than not is a high-ranking military official, like a general. Military dictatorships tend to use violence and intimidation as a way to seize and maintain power, though this doesn't always have to be the case for a government to be classified as a military dictatorship. A prime modern-day example of a military dictatorship is the current situation in Myanmar, though there have been several others in previous decades, such as Chile under Augusto Pinochet or Greece under Georgios Papadopoulos. That guy. Single-party dictatorship. Single-party dictatorships are a political system where only one political party has absolute control over the nation, and the forming of other parties is forbidden. While single-party dictatorships often have a single leader at the top, the leader shares power with the party and doesn't have absolute power over the state, thus technically isn't a full-blown dictator. Single-party dictatorships, not to be confused with single-party states, are characterized by their usage of propaganda, secret police, and/or military might to maintain control over their nation through fear and paranoia. The current best example of a single-party dictatorship was the Soviet Union in the years following the rule of Joseph Stalin. Another modern-day example is the People's Republic of China, with the Chinese Communist Party having complete control over China. Although Winnie the Pooh's basically established himself as the permanent leader of China, so this may not be the case anymore. Yeah, so much for People's Republic of China. But hey, they got the China part right, you gotta give them that. Personalist Dictatorship. A personalist dictatorship is a type of dictatorship wherein all the power is held by a single individual. Dictators of a personalist dictatorship can be high-ranking members of the military, the leader of a political party, or something else entirely, like Turkmenistan's current dictator who was the dentist of the last dictator, Turkmenbashi. Not even joking, he was a dentist.
Dennis, presumably. I give you my house.
Yeah, okay, well, yeah, now it's starting to make sense. Read on.
On the sole condition that Frank not be allowed in.
I would never let him in.
What?
But either way, neither the military nor the political party exercise power independently from the dictator. There isn't a single way personalist dictatorships are normally formed, but they tend to take control of a power vacuum left by a previous failed government, which almost always results in the government having no form of internal checks and balances, and its fair share of human rights violations. A prime example of a personalist dictatorship is North Korea, with its current leader Kim Jong-un holding absolute power over the nation. Goofy haircut. Puppet dictatorship. A puppet dictatorship can be any of the other types of dictatorships mentioned in this video, but are distinct in how they are formed and operate. Puppet dictatorships are established through a new regime being financially and militarily backed by a larger, more powerful nation, such as the Soviet Union or the Grand Old US of A. And I mean, the US has backed a lot of dictatorships, like a ludicrous amount. If countries had hobbies, America's would be backing dictatorships. It's insane.
Vito? What the fuck?
Sal, hey,
Fuck you doing?
nothing. I was here. It's a joke.
But yeah, there have been countless examples of puppet dictatorships. In fact, I think most dictatorships in the 20th century were all puppet dictatorships. Like, yeah, fucking God bless the USA. Temporary dictatorship. A temporary dictatorship, also known as a transitional dictatorship, is a political situation where a single person is selected or elected to have absolute power over a nation for a limited period of time, often during times of internal or external crisis, or after the fall of a previous government. Dictators in temporary dictatorships are given complete control over their nation, usually to make quick and important decisions to restabilize their nation or to control it while a new system is being implemented. Temporary dictatorships are rarely established through a coup, but they can be. A great example of a nation that implemented temporary dictatorships was the Roman Republic, where in times of war or other crises, I don't know. A single Roman would be elected dictator and given total control over Rome. That's also where we get the word dictator from Latin dictator. So I guess temporary dictatorship was like the OG style of dictatorship. Theocratic Dictatorship. A theocratic dictatorship is a form of government where a single religious leader and/or a religious group hold absolute power over a nation, with no separation of church and state whatsoever, imposing almost exclusively religious laws suppressing dissent and especially other religions. Theocratic dictatorships usually come to power when a religious institution of a nation is given too much power in the politics of said nation, or when a religious institution steps in after a previous failed government leaves a power vacuum. They can also be formed when a religious group founds their own nation. It's important to note that a theocratic dictatorship, while similar, is not the same thing as a theocracy. All theocratic dictatorships are theocracies, but not all theocracies are theocratic dictatorships. There haven't really been any theocratic dictatorships, but the best modern example of a theocratic dictatorship is, hear me out, Vatican City. Look, I know it's controversial, and I'm a Catholic myself, but technically, it is a theocratic dictatorship. Monarchic Dictatorship. A monarchic dictatorship, more commonly known as an absolute monarchy, is a system of government where a ruling monarch holds absolute power over the nation. Succession is almost always passed down to the oldest living son of the current monarch, typically a king or emperor. I know the feminists aren't happy about this one. It's usually a king passing it down to a prince. I don't make the rules. That's just the way it is. But I suppose it could also be a queen passing it down to a princess. Historically, absolute monarchies were established through the conquest of ancient cities and settlements. Absolute monarchies are often characterized by their exercise of power through, you guessed it, intimidation, violence, and many other human rights violations. There have been countless examples of absolute monarchies or monarchic dictatorships throughout history, with my personal favorite being the Roman Empire. That's why I made the little ball guy a Roman. That's why my name is based Roman. Yeah, you get it. Moving on. Elective Dictatorship. An elective dictatorship has two definitions. The first is often called executive dominance, which is a democratic system where a government with a parliamentary majority exercises significant power without effective checks and balances, passing legislation with little opposition or no opposition whatsoever. This often leads to the elected leader, like a prime minister, becoming the de facto dictator of the nation. Executive dominance shares many of the same characteristics as a single-party dictatorship, but is distinct as it doesn't outright ban political opposition. The second definition of an elective dictatorship is when a single person is willingly and knowingly by the population and/or politicians elected into a position of absolute power, without the use of military might or other forms of intimidation. This rarely happens, though, unsurprisingly. There aren't any clear modern-day examples of an elective dictatorship, but the current political situation in Canada under Trudeau seems to be heading in the direction of an elective dictatorship. Looks like the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. By the way, you can't convince me that Trudeau is not Castro's son. I mean, just look at him. Look at him. Hybrid dictatorship. A hybrid dictatorship is a dictatorship that embodies the key characteristics of multiple types of dictatorships. So you can essentially mix and match any of the aforementioned dictatorships and get yourself a hybrid dictatorship. But the most common type of hybrid dictatorship embodies all or most characteristics of military, personalist, and single-party dictatorships. And it's no surprise that this often leads to the dictatorship being among the most cruel and totalitarian states in human history. Just a cluster of human rights violations. Hybrid dictatorships are often created when an aspiring artist gets denied into art school. I'm kidding, although that did happen. They're established through a combination of exploiting democratic institutions while simultaneously consolidating authoritarian control, often through strategic alliances, manipulation of political processes, and selective reforms aimed at maintaining power. In case you haven't guessed by now, the best example of a hybrid dictatorship was Nazi Germany, with the military maintaining control, the Nazi Party being the sole ruling party, and Adolf Hitler being the personalist dictator, with all the power. And there goes any monetization I was hoping to get for this video. God, why did I end off with this one? Alright, and that's been all the types of dictatorships explained. Thank you guys for watching, all 7 of you probably. Yeah, hopefully this takes off. If it does, I'll make more of these. This is my first time doing a explained video. Yeah, I never saw anybody do this one, so I wanted to do it myself.